Hi everyone, we're starting our next section called the midpoint formula, and it's section 5B. So what we're going to be doing today is, instead of looking for the length of a segment as we did in the first section, in section 5A, today we're going to be looking at trying to find the middle point of any line segment. So if we were given a line segment AB, we can find the midpoint of it, or that is the point that lies halfway or midway between a point A and point B, for example. So we've got -3, 3 here, and 5 and -1 here for points A and B, and therefore we want to find what's going to be the middle point here. Okay? Now, this is basically going to tell us that if I had this as AB and I called M the midpoint, then AM would have to be exactly the same length as MB. Alright, so the midpoint formula is kind of intuitive in that basically what you would be doing is you would be looking to add up together the x values of the points given, and you would divide them by 2. And then you would do the same thing with the y values. So you would take your y values that are given, and then you would divide them by 2. And that would give you the new coordinates of the midpoint. So I would do x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And then I would do, after the comma, then I would have y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if I were to perform or use this law now, or this formula, to find the midpoint of the diagram here on at the top, so I know that the value of one of the points is -3 and 3, so that's for A, and I know that B is 5 and -1, so I could call this x1, y1, and I could call this x2, y2. I could have done it the other way around. Okay, it wouldn't have changed anything. So that I will say that the midpoint is going to equal to, so the x1 is going to be -3 plus x2, which is 5, and that'll be divided by 2. That would be my x value of that point, or the x coordinate. And then I would do the y1, which is 3, plus y2. Now the y2 is a -1, so it would be 3 plus -1, or 3 minus 1, divided by 2. And then when I simplify these, I end up getting 2 over 2 and 2 over 2. And 2 over 2 is nothing more than 1 and 1. Therefore, we can say that the midpoint is going to be 1, the coordinates 1, 1. Alright, now let's try doing another example. We'll do a couple of other examples here so that I can have, let's take H. So because I know that the midpoint formula is equal to, okay? Great. Ma cosa è successo? Che schifo. Ok, then go into class. Non lo so, qualcuno deve essere stato... Ok, ma evidentemente qualcuno è stato male, cioè... Vabbè!
E stai male a casa tua.
Povero, cioè se succede, succede a volte, Puoi chiudere la porta prima che mi entra? No dai, cioè non... Io sono molto suscettibile, io riesco a vomitare se sento... No, ma guarda, non sto scherzando, odori mi fanno venire da vomitare, quindi, cioè, vai. Delightful. All right. So the midpoint is going to equal, according to our law here, according to our law, the midpoint is going to be equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2 in the coordinates, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So I could call in part H here, I could call this x1, I'll call that y1. I can call this x2 and I'll call that y2. So then I'll start with my x coordinates first, and I'll do 3 plus 1 divided by 2. And then my y coordinate would be -2 plus -5, which makes it -2 minus 5 over 2. So in simplification here, it's going to become 4 over 2, and negative 7 over 2. Negative 7 over 2 being the same thing as negative 3.5. So it's going to be the actual midpoint then will be 2 and negative 3.5. Okay? All right. Let's see another situation. And the other situation is, well, what if now I have the midpoint? So I have the midpoint, and I have the midpoint, and I also have another point, one of the points, and I have to find the other point. So basically, if I were looking at this, I could take part A here as my first example. I could say that if I make my xy coordinate plane here, I can graph this quite quickly, so that I would say 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be my A, 6 and 4. Then my midpoint, which is going to always be written out as M, or capital M, my midpoint is found at 1, 2, 3, and negative 1. Okay, so this would be my midpoint at 3 and negative 1. So what the question now is asking, if you have this line where this is one point, A, it's one of the endpoints is A, and I have the midpoint, that means that the other point should be somewhere, it should be somewhere over here, because remember, it's got to have the same length. It's got to be, this has to be equal to that. Okay, so if I extend this line just a little bit more, and so if I extend the line, I can have a pretty good idea of where the point is going to be, but it doesn't tell me for sure what the point is going to be. So I extended here the straight line, and it should hit if I put my points at the right, in the right spot, in the correct place. But what we would do, though, if we had to do it algebraically, so it's not the geometric way, because geometrically I know that I can look at this and say, oh, it's going to be found at, so the point is down here, so it'll be 0 and negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6. It'll be at 0 and negative 6. I've found my other point here. My point B, or my other endpoint, is going to be 0 and negative 6. But if I have to do this algebraically without drawing out the diagram, what I would do is I would take my formula, m equals, and it's x sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. And again, it's y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. Now, I would start by finding the midpoint of the x value first. Or rather, I already have the midpoint of the x value first, but I'm going to find the x value first. So it would really be like saying the midpoint of the x's. So I say, well, the midpoint of the x here is equal to 3. And then I'll say that my x sub 1 is equal to 6 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. Okay? And I don't even need to put the brackets there. And then I'll isolate for x, so I'll have 6 is equal to 6 plus x sub 2. And I end up getting that x sub 2 is equal to 0. So therefore, I know at this point that the other value of b has an x value of 0. Now, I have to figure out what the y value is. So to figure out the y value, I'm going to move this up a little bit. So to figure out the y value, I'm going to say, well, my y value of the midpoint is equal to negative 1, because it's up here in the problem. So I'll write negative 1 is equal to, and I'll take the value of 4 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. And I end up getting negative 2 is equal to, is going to equal to 4 plus y sub 2. And in isolating for y sub 2, I end up getting it's equal to negative 6. And that's exactly what I found in my problem. So that I now have that the two coordinates therefore of the other endpoint, therefore the other endpoint B has coordinates of 0 and negative 6. And again, I found it very quickly just by using the diagram, but if you were to do this algebraically, which you do need to know how to do, we could do it by finding the other value by using the formula again, except we're isolating for one of the x values as opposed to the m. All right. Now, the last question I'd like to go over is this one that says segment AB is the diameter of a circle that has a center C. So it says if A is equal to 3, negative 2, and B is negative 1 and negative 4, you are being asked to find the coordinates of C. Well, because it's at the center C, it means that it's also going to be the radius. So it's the halfway point. So I'll say the midpoint is going to equal, and I'll do the x's first, 3 minus 1 divided by 2, and then I'll do my y's, negative 2 minus negative 4 divided by 2, so that I get 3 minus 1 is 2, all divided by 2 for the x's, and negative 2 plus 4 divided by 2, which ends up giving me 1 over 1 and 1. So I end up getting here 1 over 1, or just 1, and 2 over 2 is going to be, again, 1. So I know that my point, it can't be 1 and 1. Negative 2, oh, it's plus, sorry. It's negative 2 plus negative 4. So that would be negative 2 minus 4, which takes me to negative 6 over 2. I apologize, and that should be negative 3. That makes more sense. It's at 1 and negative 3. All right, I'm done, so that you will be working in class on these questions. Okay, it's not probably going to take you the whole period. You are to work quietly otherwise. All right, thank you. See you next time.